Picture this. It's 1994, middle of the Sahara Desert. A man is running a race with 133 other people, and he just vanishes. No body, no equipment, not a single trace. For 9 whole days, he was gone. And then he reappears, hundreds of kilometers from where he started, and he's alive. This is the unbelievable story of Mauro Prosperi and how he survived an ordeal that, it seems, even death itself rejected.
I mean, it's a terrifying thought, isn't it? The Sahara, it's not just a place where you get a little turned around. It's a place that can swallow you whole. So how in the world did one guy survive 9 days completely alone in this sea of sand? Well, the answer, and this is pretty wild, it all starts with who he was before he ever stepped foot in that desert.
You see, Mauro Prosperi was not your average person. Sure, he was an Italian police officer, but he was way more than that. He was an incredibly disciplined athlete. For him, this wasn't just a hobby, it was a way of life that had basically forged him into an endurance machine. And his sport of choice? The pentathlon.
Now, the pentathlon isn't just some random mix of sports. You gotta understand where it comes from. It was literally designed to simulate the experience of a 19th century soldier fighting his way out from behind enemy lines. It's a pure test of survival skills, which, I mean, talk about foreshadowing, right? It was the absolute perfect training for what was coming his way.
So just think about that combo for a second. You've got the precision of fencing and shooting, the pure endurance of swimming and running, and the adaptability of horse riding. This kind of training does more than just get you in shape. It hardwires a certain belief system into your brain, a never-give-up mentality that would end up being his lifeline.
So, with that kind of mindset, what do you do next? Well, for Mauro, it meant setting his sights on one of the most grueling, just absolutely brutal endurance challenges on the entire planet, the Marathon des Sables. And let me tell you, calling this thing a race doesn't even do it justice. It's a direct confrontation, a showdown between one person and the raw, unforgiving power of nature.
The rules are just brutal. We're talking over 250 kilometers in 7 days, and get this, you have to carry everything. And I mean everything you need to survive right there on your back. The organizers give you a little water and a basic tent flap to share, but everything else, your food, your gear, your will to live, that's all on you. You are completely and totally on your own.
All right, so here we go. It's day 4 of the race. This is the big one, the longest and most dangerous stage of the whole event. Mauro, who's 38 at the time, is feeling strong. He's feeling great, so he decides to push his pace, pulling ahead of the pack and venturing out all by himself into this vast open desert.
And then, way off in the distance, he sees it. Just a small, swirling column of sand. You know, a dust devil. It's a common sight out there. Kind of annoying, sure, but not something you'd think would be a sign of impending doom. Or so he thought.
But here's the thing about the Sahara, it doesn't really do warnings. In what felt like just a few seconds, that little swirl just explodes. We're talking about an 8-hour, full-blown sandstorm, a furious, blinding wall of sand just tearing across the landscape, swallowing up everything in its path, including Mauro. So he has this split-second, impossible choice to make. Stop and risk being literally buried alive by the shifting sand. Or keep moving. He chose to run. He just kept running blind through this total chaos, convinced he could somehow stay on track. He was wrong. After running for hours through the storm, the sand finally settles. But when it does, the world he knew is just gone. The trail markers, the footprints, any sign of the race had been completely erased. He was utterly and hopelessly lost. And what followed? Well, it was a 9-day descent into a primal struggle just to exist, a journey that would push the absolute limits of what a human body and mind can possibly endure. Those first few days were just this vicious cycle of hope and then crushing despair. So he gets lost. Then he sees a rescue helicopter. He fires his flare gun, but the pilot doesn't see him against the glare of the sun. He finds an abandoned Muslim shrine, a brief moment of shelter that quickly turns into a prison of solitude. And by day 7, he hits absolute rock bottom. Okay, this is where things get truly grim. To stay alive, he had to do the unthinkable. When his water ran out, he drank his own urine. Inside that shrine, desperate for any liquid and protein, he captured bats, cut off their heads with his pocket knife, and drank their blood. His diet became whatever he could find: lizards, insects, even raw snakes. By the 7th day, he was just
broken. Broken by the loneliness, the thirst, the pain. He was completely convinced he was going to die right there. He had lost every last shred of hope. So he found a small piece of charcoal and he wrote a final goodbye note to his wife and his family.
And then he took his pocket knife and cut the veins in his wrists. He lay down in the silence of the shrine, closed his eyes, and waited for the end.
But he woke up the next morning. He was still alive. And the reason why is just unbelievable. His 9 days of extreme dehydration had made his blood so thick that it clotted almost immediately, sealing the wounds. His own body was literally too dried out to die. And that was the turning point. He realized if death itself had rejected him, maybe, just maybe, he was meant to live. I mean, everything changed in that moment. All that hopelessness was just gone, replaced by this cold, hard determination. He was no longer a lost runner waiting to be saved. He was a survivor. He wasn't going to surrender to the desert. He was going to fight it. He was no longer the prey. He had to become the hunter.
So he abandoned the panic and came up with a calculated plan. He used his compass to head towards a distant mountain range, knowing that's where he might find life. He only walked during the cooler hours of the day, rested during the brutal midday heat, and buried himself in the sand at night to stay warm. He was adapting, he was surviving, he was fighting back.
On the 8th day, he found a small oasis with some muddy water. Then, on the 9th day, he saw a sign of life he hadn't seen in over a week: fresh goat droppings. He followed the trail, his body nothing but a skeletal frame, until he saw them, goats, and with them, a small Tuareg girl. When he was finally brought to a military camp, the soldiers made a shocking discovery. He wasn't in Morocco anymore. He had walked 291 kilometers off course, right across the border into Algeria. A man who was presumed dead had just crossed a country on foot, completely alone.
And the physical toll was just staggering. Over those 9 days, his body had essentially consumed itself to survive. He lost 15 kilograms, that's nearly 33 pounds. Doctors who later examined him were absolutely stunned that he was even alive, let alone conscious. His organs were on the verge of total failure.
Meanwhile, back in Italy, his family had already accepted his death. So can you even imagine when the call came through that Mauro was alive in Algeria? It was a shock beyond belief. It was like a resurrection. The man they had mourned was talking to them on the phone. His survival was considered a medical impossibility. And here is the most incredible part of this entire story. Most people would never want to see a grain of sand again after an ordeal like that. But Mauro Prosperi, he went back. He raced in the Marathon des Sables 6 more times. His experience didn't break him, it redefined him. And his quote really says it all. He learned the meaning of life only when he came face to face with death. And it kind of begs the question, right? How close do we have to get to losing everything to truly understand what it means to be alive?